Yet another saga into the continuing hidden history of the African American fighting man. With all that's going on, ladies and gentlemen, I decided that it would be wise to give this part of the saga. There were 900 men, 900 Marines, pardon me, who fought on the Japanese island of Iwo Jima. This is where you have seen the famed pictures of the raising of Old Glory, the raising of the American flag by 6 brave Americans of mixed origin, I might add. But there were 900. Of course, Clint Eastwood did not include not one African American in his movie Flags of Our Fathers. So, but I'm bringing this up for a very good reason. Because, ladies and gentlemen, that's what's wrong in my great country. The history and sacrifice of brave men who have fought for this country has been whitewashed. And the effect of that is not only the ignorance of both neo-Confederates, white supremacists, but also of African Americans, not unlike NFL football players. There are many of us who don't know that there were over 2 million African Americans who participated in World War II. Many of us don't know that. We don't understand the concept of pride that's driven by those brave men who fought for their country and to protect the Constitution. Now, because you don't know that, it implies that somehow or another we are detached from the heritage of America and the sacrifice thereof. There's no pride, one could argue. And quite the contrary should be the case. You see, ladies and gentlemen, it was on this day that the Secretary of Navy had to get African Americans to fight. In every war this country has had, going back to the Pilgrims, there's been a quest, a necessity for African Americans to fight. I dare say, ladies and gentlemen, because there was a great need for African Americans to fight, it would be easy to assume that had we not fought, had my ancestors not fought, we wouldn't have these United States. George Washington expressed that very, very well. However, it was on this date, back in 1862, that back in 1861, that the Secretary of the Navy authorized the enlistment of African Americans in the United States Navy. They could serve as boys. By the way, it wasn't just, that was a rank, you understand. It wasn't just that they were boys. But there was an insistence. And by the end of the Civil War, 1/4 of the U.S. Navy was, in fact, African Americans, which brings rise to the Marines there, 900 strong. I enjoyed talking to my dear friend, Mr. Watson, the other day, who himself is a Marine and came back to do great things in Pakistan. But it's important to note that Gene Doughty was one of those brave African American men who was at Iwo Jima, February 19th, 1945. Served well, a Munford Marine, and very proud of his flag and the national anthem. Now, I'm saying all this to say this, ladies and gentlemen. With all that's going on, and we're going to get knee-deep into it, we're going to get up to our neck in it. It's important for me, as the son of an African-American veteran, at least 3 times, from Vicksburg during the Civil War and Kentucky, to World War I and World War II with my father. Patriotism, ladies and gentlemen, is born out of the pride you have in defending your home. There's no litmus test for it. Oxy-conservatives lead you to believe that, and before this is over, you will understand how the most unpatriotic thing is racial bigotry, especially white supremacy. If it's one recognition of a fascist society, it's that. Always has been. But let me get into this because it's near and dear to me. We had great conversation regarding Colin Kaepernick's boycott, or should I say his protest. And I don't want to go back into it, but I will tell you this. When such time there is protest, you protest the antagonist. When the bus boycott happened in Montgomery, Alabama, no one went to a football game to protest it. They protested at the bus stop. During the 1960s, even 50s and 60s, at every football game during segregated schools, there was the national anthem. And there was the American flag. I don't remember seeing the state flag. In just about every church service, there was the national anthem, and then there was lift every voice and sing. And typically in that order. I want to make it very clear because I think that there's a generation who probably have not either learned or chose not to understand the concept of what protest and fight was during that era, and somehow or another have got it somewhat twisted. Protests are designed to get something done, not just show. It is designed to confront the antagonist. It is designed with a mission and a strategy involved that can result in a cure, a codified cure, whatever that might be. It might be riding anywhere on a bus. It might be going on a beach. Or it might be registering to vote. But the protest is right there. If African Americans were not allowed to sit at a public place at a bus, let's say at a bus terminal, they didn't go to the Shalimar Lounge to protest that. For those who know what that is, they didn't go to Birdland on Ferry Street to protest that. They may have gone there to organize the protest, but the protest happened there at the bus station. There was a confrontation of the tyrant or the law, forcing it into the courts, or for that matter, challenging, making sure that there is an established challenge to the law itself, to motivate voters to vote against it. See, protest was for a cause, it wasn't just because. So now with that said, ladies and gentlemen, I took issue with Colin Kaepernick, and I still do, with where the protest was. But there's a greater issue here that was exhibited on yesterday, and I'm very proud of it, particularly those who participated in the NFL. There was a protest of our president. You see, the antagonist was the president, and by what the president did, it caused solidarity among those players, the likes of which Colin Kaepernick could not achieve. However, I want to make this very clear. The antagonist for the killing of unarmed African Americans by cops is not the national anthem, not America, and it's not the flag. It isn't, folks. The antagonist is racial bigotry, period, and fear. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I have at my disposal several of those banners. This flag, right here, near and dear to me. It flew over Camp Freedom during there in Afghanistan. It was presented to me by a captain who was there and who returned. We had chatted with on many occasions. Near and dear to me. Near, not your banner, but this banner. And this banner represents to me, ladies and gentlemen, an example of what my ancestors fought for. And that was this country. In this country, they would assure their freedom. In this country. And then there's this banner that was presented to me on April 8th, 2017. This banner right here. It's near and dear to me. That was the banner presented to me after it was lifted from the coffin of my father, Sandy Daniel. Now, under no circumstances would I ever even begin to consider some disrespect for that banner. That banner. You see, that banner represents 50 stars, 13 stripes. Right? It represents a united states, not a united people. There is some assumption that somehow or another we've never been united. It's okay. But there's a concept going back to the Revolutionary War among Negroes, African Americans, was that at the very least, if I have any opportunity to fight for and defend freedom and to establish some kind of justice, is right here in this country. And you're not going to run me off. That's what it's about. See, my father and 2 million others fought during World War II, noting that they were treated like second-class citizens, but they knew if anywhere in this world they were going to establish justice and freedom, it was going to be here, and they're going to make it be that. I want you to really understand what I said just then. They're going to make it be that. It is not an option, which is why frequently you would hear Martin Luther King use the Constitution as a basis for his defense of his rights. There's a guideline, Constitution. Now I've got to force the American citizens to make it applicable to all. Now, folks, be it African Americans, be it women, that was the case. So, the antagonist for Rip Daniels is not the national anthem and or the flag, and the concept of protest for Rip Daniels is more about the bigot who does the shooting. And there's some effective ways of dealing with that, and maybe I'll share some of those once I get into this. But as I look at how this thing unfolds, I say to myself, you know, I think that the whitewashing of our history has created an environment whereby good God-fearing Americans feel divided about things that really and truthfully they agree with. See, I think it's because of the ignorance of Caucasians on the whole, the whitewashing of your history, that you can't imagine. There is the idea of 2 million African Americans in World War II, 900 Marines at Iwo Jima, or the 9th and 10th Cavalry defending, saving Teddy Roosevelt's behind in San Juan, or the free people of color in War of 1812, or the idea of the 761st Tank Battalion spending more time in combat than any other tank battalion in the history of this country. 183 days under fire. You see, the idea that those African Americans did that is just nothing to celebrate, because you didn't know it. Now you do. Which is why I open this show every time with those brave African Americans who fought for this country, and thereby defending their families. No country, no family, no constitution, no rights as established to defend themselves from the very government that was established. Very real. Very real. So we're going to get into it, and I'm up for the debate. You're going to hear from everybody, from Drew Brees, and especially you're going to hear from Donald John. But I need to share this with you because I now get it. You know, I've suggested to you that our president is a Manchurian president. And if those want to debate that, we can. I don't mind. But now I kept asking, well, why would the Russians want him to win? I kept asking that. In other words, there's cause and effect. And, you know, I pride myself with playing a decent game of chess and looking 8 moves down the road. Should look more than that. But I kept trying to figure out, well, okay, so now it's become more than apparent that Donald John was the pick for Vladimir Putin. There's no doubt that there's been a relationship with him and Russia and so forth. He lied about just about literally everything, no one having any contact with the Russians. All of that is all going to come out in the wash. But I shared with you a scenario last time that made me kind of shudder and thinking how this thing could unfold. This thing, what is it? The utter and complete isolation, the subordination of America by Russia. And this goes back to Khrushchev. This is theory, but it's not a far-fetched theory. As I look at things unfolding now and the reluctance of one Donald John to even criticize Vladimir Putin or Russia, and as I look at where the pieces are being placed on this great chessboard called the Earth, it's now crystal clear. You see, there's those of you who think that there's a conventional concept of war, meaning, you know, there's a landing of a flotilla on a beach, and you go in, you kill a bunch of people, you destroy a lot of things. I don't think that's modern-day warfare. Modern-day warfare, with the advent of bombs, is the concept of mutual annihilation, where you don't want to be annihilated, obviously. So what you do is you put yourself in a position whereby you could, and then consequently your opponent submits. He's a bigger, stronger guy. He can take me out. Okay, well then now I've got to negotiate from a position of weakness. Now I've got to subordinate. That's why you had superpowers and not superpowers, right? In other words, there's a concept that they've got the upper hand. Now, having the upper hand does not mean that you can't fight. It just simply means, well, if you do fight, your country will be so destroyed that there'll be nothing left to work with. Or that it can really adversely affect the entire Earth, one can argue, given the nuclear explosions and the like. So with that in mind, I'm going to take you back to that chess game. I think that Vladimir Putin has the absolute right guy in office. He wanted Donald John in office because Donald John would do exactly what he has been doing. And that is create a certain kind of chaos and an environment such that Americans are back wanting to kill each other. I do think that he could push it to the brink. That's why you would go to Alabama and say what he said. That's why you would tap into the greatest fears of Americans and the greatest hatred. So he's got this going on. I've not seen this kind of overt, in some cases, overt racism on the part of individuals since the 1960s, folks. A resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan, a resurgence of neo-Nazis. He didn't call them sons of bitches, did he? I'll get to that in a minute. So he's got, look, folks, let me just tell you, this Colin Kaepernick thing, for the most part, had relented until he then goes in and he pulls this back up. He does it periodically, just to maintain his base. Who are those in his base? Those who are gullible enough to think. Gullible enough and ignorant enough to their history to think that somehow or another they're better Americans than other Americans because their sacrifices were greater. You know who you are. You're the ones who didn't know about the 900 and Iwo Jima. So he's got this going. You know, he's got this racial strife, and it's actually, I mean, more guns are being bought now than what was bought in the 60s. By the way, I'm going to go buy another one. And I'm just saying, you get this going. Simultaneously, you challenge the free press, the whole concept of free press. You get actually Americans then not knowing what is real, what isn't. You get fake news started, and there's a lack of confidence. It becomes more indoctrination. You really become a conservative news and a liberal news, go figure. That kind of division, and it's like what is real and what isn't, and you draw the line between what is actually journalism and what isn't, what's commentary and what isn't. And you actually cause Americans to doubt even what their government is saying. That simultaneously with then creating strife here in this way. Vladimir Putin's page, it's very simple. What you do is you get an opponent stretched out, his army, his military stretched out halfway around the world, which we are. We're in Iraq, we're in Afghanistan, we're in Syria, and now beefing up in North Korea. But the other caveat is that you get North Korea to have a hydrogen bomb, and then you've got now a larger nemesis. That is a decoy. That, in my view, is, okay, let them be interested in this while we build a military base, the largest military base that we've ever had in the North Pole. I'll get to that in a minute. So, this, you got to understand, what is it, the 7th Fleet, the Atlantic Fleet now, is preoccupied, by the way, with 2 ships lacking because they had a suspicious, should I say, accident, losing sailors. It's sitting there in the Sea of Japan. All right? Donald John picks this fight. And then picks another fight there in Iran. By the way, you realize that North Korea is an ally of Moscow, Russia. The other ally is Iran. Russia signed on to the deal with Iran, but they are the ones who provided the information for the nukes. So now you've got Iran now, and Donald John saying is getting rid of the deal. And no doubt will probably try anything to get the Iranians to now start rekindling what Russia wants them to rekindle, and that is the nukes. Because they're bordering the Persian Gulf, where our other fleet is. Simultaneously building a base in the North Pole. And do you realize, ladies and gentlemen, and when you're in the North Pole, you do understand that most of NATO is closer to the North Pole than they are to Moscow. In other words, when you have a base the size that Vladimir Putin has, it is far easier to shoot from the North Pole to San Francisco. The distance is what I'm looking at here. Oh, you can send a fleet across the North Pole now because of the melt and the Bering Straits. But there's something else about the North Pole that also is quite interesting. No one would want to fire a nuke and use nukes on the North Pole. You know why? It has something to do with the axis and the ozone. And the fear that all that melting ice is going to cause cataclysmic kinds of activity throughout the rest of the world. So it becomes a bargaining chip. How so? Well, I've got the North Pole. And, you use your nukes and you might even hit Moscow. But if you shoot it up here, then you're going to cause serious problems in your cities. Or you're going to have the great melt. And who knows what else is going to transpire. Let's not play with that. You can actually put radioactivity in the ozone, and I don't have any idea what that does. And so there's a reluctance on the part of America to even blow it up if under a nuclear attack. No attack yet. It's just the advantage. We in chess know this. You just got the high ground. And you've got the ability you've got the advantage. So now you only have the Pacific Fleet. Well, Russia has a greater border on the Pacific than does America. And here you have now Kim Jong-un talking about firing a hydrogen bomb in the Pacific, which could very well create a pulse, electronic pulse, that will knock out and can knock out, so I've heard from military experts, anything electronic, ship or otherwise, nuclear or otherwise. So now, there are your chess pieces. You've got the potential for nukes in Iran. You've got nukes in the Korean Peninsula. And then you've got literally an isolation of the Atlantic is particularly on the eastern seaboard. You realize, ladies and gentlemen, there's only 2 shipbuilders here in our great country of ours. Yeah, I mean, you Ingalls, and then of course the eastern seaboard. There is it Newport News, I think. And one of you guys out there, you know what I'm talking about. Just give me a call. I mean, for the most part, I'm saying that for a reason, because when you have a base in the North Pole, you literally have access to just about every latitude, certainly every longitude, and the distance is a little closer. And that combined with the insulation of saying you don't really want to tamper with blowing anything up here. You don't want to have any seismic activity in the North Pole is the point. Heaven forbid a sheet of ice the size of Rhode Island drops off and you've got tsunamis in the UK. I'm just saying. So I'm going to tell you, folks, it's just a theory. But I wonder, as I see Donald John do this over and over again, and what he doesn't do, his lackluster desire to defend this country, I say to myself, looks to me like he could very well be the knight on the chessboard. Yeah. The knight is evasive and invasive. It's the only piece on the chessboard that can jump pieces. But it makes predictable moves, kind of an L-shaped move for those of you who play the game. It's always used as the aggressor. That's the piece that gets things started, the antagonist. It sets up the board, typically. It moves in and around its own pawns, its own men. And even those men don't know exactly where the knight's going to go next, but the knight knows. He serves at the direction of the king. He lays it out. His job, the knight on the chessboard, is to create the environment such that he has the advantage. You see, you want to have all your pieces in the right place. For those of you who play chess, it's the same thing. You set the board up. You're looking at the end game, you know. You might even give away a pawn. You might even give away a rook or a bishop. You're setting up the table for the ultimate checkmate. I think that's where we are, folks. I hope it's not. I really do. But with all of this involved, from minimizing the importance of the free press to developing overt strife between the people, I mean, it's gone beyond ideological now. So, we got some folks coming to blows here. You had close to 300 militiamen in Charlottesville. He outnumbered the cops. Let me tell you, Don't say this can't happen. Now, you got to say not one shot's fired. It's just the upper hand. If, in fact, Russia is placed in that position with their base in the North Pole, and they say to America, look, here's what we need you to do. Trust me on this. We're going to have some decisions to make. Either we acquiesce, submit, or we fight. And I'm going to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, given the tenor, given some of the folks, there are folks who are supporting Russia more than they support the United States now. You do realize there are folks who are supporting neo-Nazis more than the individuals who are fighting against them. Listen, who do you think would be against neo-Nazis? Americans. The patriotic Americans. Do you realize, there's a bad on both sides. Really? You don't get more fascists and, do you have any idea how many Americans Nazis killed? How in the heck could anyone think that they're just like the other ones on the other side? And you've got these little Caucasian kids wanting to be like them and no criticism? And they're certainly not sons of bitches. So I have very serious concerns about this. Very serious concerns. And I think yesterday's protest was a protest against the president. We have a sitting president calling for a boycott of a business. I never would have thought I'd see that. A sitting president calling for a boycott of a business. NFL. Not only that, referring to the mother of an American citizen as a bitch. A sitting president. Is that the kind of America you think is great? We'll be back.